In every cosplay I do, I always keep an eye out and try my best to get everything down perfectly to the finest detail, and that's exactly what I did for Jabber's lamp. A lot of people don't even know that he has a lamp on his outfit, and even a small detail like that can make a cosplay pop even more. So in today's video, I'm going to show you guys how I made Jabber's lamp and how a small detail like this one can make a cosplay stand out and be more accurate. And without further ado, let's get right into it. So as for the printing, I'm going to go through all the settings for you guys to give you guys like a baseline of what I actually did for every single model that I printed out. Everything was the exact same for all parts of the lamp. I did not change a single setting on both ways. Everything was mainly printed on my V3 Plus, but some of the stuff was also printed on my K1 Max, so I'm going to go through both of the settings. For the layer height, I had it on 0.2 layer height. I didn't need to move it up to 0.18 like I said for my last projects with details. This mostly didn't have too many details to work with, so I didn't have to go to 0.18 or 0.16. I just kept it at 0.2, nothing too crazy there. Moving on, I had it at 5 walls. I wanted this to be sturdy. I knew it'll be a little bit on the heavier side and it was sitting on my waist, but I didn't need it to be too crazy, so I kept it at a baseline of 5 walls. Moving on from that, the seam line obviously in the back. You do not want the seam line to show on any one of the models that you use. Always put the seam line in the back. If you want to, you could put it in the front or the sides, but you will have to sand it down because it will show. But for most of the time, I had the seam line in the back for all of the prints. Moving on from that, I had it on 10% infill. I always like to use 10%. You can go up to 15% if you want your object to be more sturdy. You can go down to 5%. I usually like to keep it at 10%. I know a lot of other people like doing it of different percentages of infill. I don't like going up too high because I don't want my props to be too sturdy, so I kept it at 10%. 210 print temp is not that crazy. You have a baseline for whatever filament you like to use. My filament that I use is Sunlu, and it prints really well at 210. Moving on, I have my K1 Max set to 100 millimeters a second. Now you might be saying, you have a K1 Max, why not just go super fast and get it done? I was in no rush to get this lamp done at all. I had it going like a cruise mode at 100 millimeters a second and everything was fine. Moving on from that, we have the supports. So for the supports, I use tree supports. I don't use regular supports anymore as much because tree supports just is overwhelmingly better than regular supports. Now sometimes you will need to use regular supports depending on what you're using, but for me, I love using tree supports and I'm not going to change. So I use tree supports for that, and then obviously I kept it as a wrap for the adhesion, and that's basically it. I had ironing on, which ironing does is that last layer at the top of your print, it'll smooth it out and get it like really smooth, and I put that on for this. I still needed to put Bondo over the top of everything anyway, but it's just good to have ironing on just to get it a little more smooth. So with all the settings out the way, I started off by printing the big cube part of the lamp, and it was nothing crazy here. I just printed it standing up. Always print standing up. You keep the quality of your print, and if you have enough walls and infill, you will keep the strength as well. I know in my Jabber Claws video, I didn't really print as much standing up because I needed to be way more sturdy, but if you print standing up on most of your objects, you will keep that quality, which I really wanted, and you will keep that in, or will keep a little bit of the strength. It won't have as much strength as if you lay it flat, but for something like this, you would want to print it standing up, and I always maintain that rule of printing standing up. Nothing too crazy here. It took a day. It took a little bit less of the day. The estimate is wrong because the K1 Max is always faster than Cura's estimate, and this was back when I was actually using Cura, so it took about 19 hours to 20 hours, not the 23. I have B-roll here. I'll throw it up on the screen, and nothing too crazy here. I just let it go up on itself slowly and let the tree supports do its thing. Like I said about that ironing, this is like the smooth part of it at the top, and the ironing covers that. I wanted it to be smooth even though I was going over it with Bondo anyway, but I still liked it to have it smooth, and I didn't have to do as much work. Just put Bondo on at the top when I was sanding, so that was good. But other than that, it was nothing too crazy to printing this at all, and it just went up. Now moving on to the lens part of the lamp, everything else from here on out was printed out on my V3 Plus, so all the settings were the exact same from my V3 Plus to my K1 Max. The only difference is I had this on 80 millimeters a second, not the 100 millimeters a second that was on my K1 Max. That's literally the only difference was the speed, but all other settings like the 0.2 seam line being in the back, everything else was the exact same. I printed this out standing up on itself just like this. It came into the printer or into the software a different way, so I had to reorient it laying like this, and I found that this was the best way to actually print it out, and it came out perfectly. Like I said, there was a little bit of scarring right here and a little bit of everything else, but as I was saying earlier about the ironing made it smoother and it took care of a lot of that, but I still had a little bit of Bondo to put on. I put on a lot of Bondo around here. I didn't really care about the inside of this because you're not really paying attention to the inside of the lamp. The outside though, I made sure to put a lot of Bondo on, and everything printed out very fast. The V3 Plus is always killing my expectations when coming out to printing things and getting things done very fast. The K1 Max and the V3 are working hand in hand with each other, and it's really making my life a lot easier printing things out. So this came out in 6 hours, but like I said, the Cura estimate is wrong. It came out in about 4 hours. It was very quick getting this done, and not a lot of post-processing work was on this lens piece at all. Like I said, the only thing that I did was put Bondo around here and Bondo around everything else. else, but the main scarring piece that I had to put Bondo on was right there. And after that, it was done, and I'll let you guys see how I printed up. Nothing too crazy, just printed up on itself slowly, and really no difference there, really no difference at all. And this is also kind of laying flat, not really standing up as much, so it was way stronger, and that was another good thing that I needed it to be strong. And I still kept the rule of printing standing up, but not really as much. But that was basically it for the lens piece. Now moving on to this little clip that's on the back of the lamp. This is a very good design. Shout out to Exhausted Weeb again. This is the same guy that I got my Jabber claws from. I'll throw it up on the screen, but this is a very good design. I do not need any Velcro, no glue, none of that. This clip right here, you print this out, you throw it onto the lamp, and you can slide it right into your pants or slide it right onto anything you want to slide it on, and it will hang perfectly. Like, this is a very good design when it comes to the innovation of that, because I didn't need anything else. I could just slide it on and it will fit perfectly right onto the cosplay. So shout out to him for that. But moving on to this right here, it wasn't really crazy. I printed this on my K1 Max. This was one of the last things that I printed on my K1 Max before fully just boat loading on to my V3 Plus. This didn't take long at all. It took about 2 hours. The estimate is wrong. Didn't take a lot of filament at all. I didn't need to reset anything, and it was very simple to do this. Just printed it standing up. Like I said, again, the ironing did take care of a lot of that, but I still needed to put a lot of Bondo on. I'll get to that in a second, but everything else was very simple. Putting this on, and it just went up. And then there was a little bit of tree supports hanging on inside the little print right here and hanging on the outside, so all I had to do was pull down and click those out. But other than that, this was a very easy thing to print out and a very easy thing to do. Now moving on to both of the screws, these were both printed standing up. I'm not going to show both of the screws on here. This was printed the exact same way as the other screw was. All I did was throw it in just like this. It came on its side. I just reoriented horizontally to get it to be perfect. I had it already standing up by itself, and it was very simple for this. There was nothing crazy to this at all. Again, there's a scarring at the top, scarring at the bottom, so I threw Bondo on the top and bottom and everywhere that it's scarred, and it came out beautiful. This was actually one of the best pieces that I enjoyed making on the actual lamp because of how good it turned out and how good I did with the Bondo. So other than that, it didn't take long at all. These were very simple to do, very strong, and that was it. Now we're moving on to the top part that's kind of like the connector piece that holds the round part, I don't know what you call that, on the lamp. This little top part right here that acts as a little connector. Moving on to that, all I did for this as well was print it standing up. Now this is a piece that you can print horizontally if you really want it to be way stronger and have a lot more sturdiness. You can print this horizontally. I chose to print this standing up, and there was really no difference. I don't think it really took a long time. Yeah, an hour and 30 minutes. It did not take a long time to print this on the V3 Plus at all, and I did not have to worry about wobbling since it's not that tall of a model to do anything with. But all that was crazy was these supports right here. It lodged supports on every single little like kind of like staircase looking thing. But other than that, it wasn't crazy at all to make this. Printed it standing up, got it done in an hour, and this was not a really important piece to me to get done. It was very quick, like throw it on the printer, push print, go away, come back, and it was done. Now moving on, this is that little outside connector piece that I was talking about earlier. This was printed on the K1 Max. I just printed it laying flat. There is no possible way, and if you guys did this and you do it standing up, I do not know how you would do that. There's really no possible way to do it standing up since it's so fragile. So I just printed it laying flat. Nothing crazy here. I didn't opt into sanding this or the other connector pieces that go onto the lamp because these are not important pieces to sand, and you're not going to really pay attention to these pieces that much. But it wasn't crazy at all. It just started off just like this. I still did a raft on this, and I just peeled it right off the raft. There was no supports really on this at all, and it just printed standing up. Nothing too crazy there. It didn't take a lot of filament. It didn't take a lot of time. So I really just threw it on the printer. Again, push print, left, came back, and it was done. Now moving on, we have 4 different connector pieces that goes on top of the little lens that I have right here. I couldn't actually get these onto the lamp, and I couldn't actually fully finish getting these on, but I'm gonna still talk about how I printed it, and I'm gonna make a version 2 of the entire lamp that will have these. But I felt as though that I can't leave these out because they are a pivotal piece of the lamp. I'll throw a picture of the lamp up right here so you guys can see what I'm actually talking about. But moving on to those connector pieces that are going onto the lenses, this was printed just like this. All 4 of them were printed the exact same way. I laid them flat horizontally. There was no point again in printing this standing up because it will break, it will fall, and it was just easier to make it stronger and to have it go horizontally and to sacrifice the quality because there's not much quality on this at all as well. So let's see how long this actually took. 39 minutes on my V3 Plus. It did not take long at all. It took less time than this. I just printed back to back and got all of these done It's unfortunate that I couldn't actually put these on the lamp, and I'll explain why later on in this video. I still am going to talk about how I printed these out, and for the next version, these will be on the lamp, and I will be making another video on this lamp as well. And yeah, that's about it. Now, I completely forgot to talk about the bulb part of the lamp. Considering I did this one very late, I was going to keep the lamp without the little bulb in the middle, but I did it very late, and I was like, I have transparent filament lying around for a project coming soon, the Tron disc. I had it lying around for that, and I was like, you know what, I can print the bulb out, and that's the little bulb, white bulb that's in the middle right here, printed with transparent PLA. I was like, I could print that out since I have the filament laying around, but this was a last minute thing. So this is actually going to be in Orca Slicer. We're now in Orca Slicer. This is the first video talking about something in Orca Slicer. I went in the Orca Slicer here when I was done with Kira, and I had to print the bulb out. This is exactly how I did it right here, the same orientation. I didn't do anything different to the settings that isn't in Kira. It's still 0.2, it's still 10% infill, it's still the same speed. It's just labeled a little bit differently because Kira or Orca has a lot of advanced settings that you can use over Kira. So this is the exact way I did it. It was on my K1 Max. I have B-roll of it. I'll throw it up on the screen right here, and nothing too crazy there. It was printed in transparent PLA, and everything came out beautifully with it. This was a last minute thing. Like I said, I was going to keep the bulb out of it because you don't need to put it in the lamp, but I was like, it's gonna look cool to have an actual lamp bulb in there. I think the next time that I make this lamp, I'm going to try to put purple lights in it to make it vibrant, but right now I just had a transparent PLA laying around, and it was just another added detail that made the lamp pop even more. Editing game here, I did not use the exact same settings because it is transparent PLA, and you do not want to have infill inside of your prop when you're using transparent PLA because you obviously want it to have transparent, you want to see through it. So I only use 0% infill. I still use the tint, or I still use the 5 walls to make the print be way stronger, so I kept it at 5 walls, but I just didn't use any infill, and that was the only difference. Now moving on to everybody's favorite part, we got sanding. Now like I said in my jabber video, instead of starting off with 80 grit sandpaper, I wanted to try something a little bit different and started off with 60 grit sandpaper and see if that'll make any of a difference of evaporating the layer lines on the print, or how it would make the print look, or if anything would change, if I wouldn't like it, if I would. It really didn't make much of a difference. So like I say in all of these videos, if you want to start off with 80 grit sandpaper, you still can, and it won't make much of a difference. I just moved on to starting it off with 60 grit because I had a lot of 60 grit sandpaper lying around, and I felt as though it's a finer grit, so it'll evaporate the layer lines even more on the dry sanding stage. So with that being said, I started it off with 60 grit sandpaper right here. Boom. Sand as much as you can. This is the main dry sanding stage. You want to evaporate those initial layer lines fresh off the printer and make sure you can get everything you can and smooth out everything you possibly can to have no layer line show. Once you're done with that, you're moving on to the 80 grit. Was my first option. Now second option, 80 grit sandpaper right there. Boom. Once you get to that 80 grit sandpaper, sand as much as you can. Now you're sanding basically the same thing. Anything you missed, you probably missed a lot from the 60 to the 80. So just keep on sanding. Go over the 60 grit sanding coat that you did as well, and you're just keep it on going, sanding. Like I said, I do not like sanding whatsoever. I love printing, I love painting. I do not like sanding. It is a tedious process, but trust me, it will be worth it in the long run when your print is smooth like a baby's behind. Moving on from there, now you're just sanding for the love of the game. You're at 120 grit. Boom. Once you get to that 120 grit, sand anything you missed, sand anything you clearly couldn't get. With the finer grits of sandpaper like the 60 and the 80, you want to go for the stuff that's scarring a lot. So you have the stuff that's at the top that you have ironed out, you have the stuff that's at the bottom, you have the stuff that the tree supports touched, everything like that is very scarred. You want to sand that to be level. Obviously you're going to hit it with the Bondo after anyway, so you can get rid of all of that completely, but you still do want to sand it with the finer grits. Once you get to that 120 150 range, you're just sanding for the love of the game. You're just going, getting anything you missed, getting anything that you couldn't really get to with the other grits, and just going in and sanding. Once you're done with that, you're moving on to 150 grit. Again, sanding for the love of the game. You know how it gets around here. Boom. You're just sanding for the love of the game. Get anything you missed with every other grit of sandpaper that you had. Sand. You don't really need to go too much, but just sand enough to get it really scuffed and really covered with that sandpaper coat. And then you're moving on to my go. In every video, I will always say 240 grit sandpaper is the GOAT of sandpapers. It's the king of all sandpaper. It's the king of all sandpaper. Boom. You see that aura? You see that right there? Boom. Once you get to the 240 grit, you're going crazy. Boom, sand, 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 sand. Now this is a very, very smooth grit. Like, it's smoother than all the other ones, obviously. So you're going to sand, you're going to go over everything you missed, you're going to go over all the scarring, and it's just like an overcoat of all the sanding that you did earlier, just to make sure you get everything. And after that, you still ain't done, boy. Don't think you finished sanding. Nah, I see you right there. You're like, oh, that's it? That's all I gotta do? You still got more steps. Trust me, you still got more. But once you're done sanding, you want to get yourself Bondo, glazing, and spot putty. I'm gonna show you guys right here. I don't have a fresh bottle. I'll throw a picture of it on the screen right there. Boom. You want to get yourself some sand or Bondo, glazing, and spot putty. Once you're done sanding everything with all the coats I just told you guys about, you can opt into washing the print. I like opting into washing the print just to get everything cleaned up for the Bondo phase, but you're gonna sand it down anyway when the Bondo's actually on. So my brother and a lot of other people don't wash the print, they just go straight to the Bondo stage. I like washing it. It's really dealer's choice. You can do whatever you want right there, but I wash it, then I hit the Bondo. Like I said, with the Bondo, get yourself a piece of foam. If you have craft foam lying around or anything like that, or you can get yourself to do the paintbrush method. When you put paint and acetone, mix that together, put I'm pretty sure it's a 2 Bondo to 1 acetone ratio, mix that together, lather it on. For this lamp, I only used Bondo. I didn't use any acetone, any paintbrushes. I just used Bondo. I used gloves. I put it on with my finger and I spread it on as much as you can. Make sure you lather the print up as much as you can with a lot of Bondo. You don't want to have anything missing any Bondo. And make sure once you get everything smooth and put all the Bondo on, you want to mainly put Bondo on all the scarring. There's going to be a ton of scarring still. You're going to still see a lot of scarring. You did level it down to make it easier on yourself putting the Bondo on, but you want to put Bondo over the scarring mainly. So once you put everything over the scarring and you know everything is clear and you're ready to go, you can let that dry. Good thing is Bondo dries very quickly. It dries in about 1 to 2 hours and it doesn't need a cure. It just dries onto the print. Make sure it's not tacky and make sure it's not clogging up the sandpaper. And once you're ready with the Bondo and you lathered it on and you made sure that you put it all on the scarring, you're ready to go back outside again with the GOAT right there, the 240 grit sandpaper. Like I said, this dude right here got both the dry sanding phase and the Bondo sanding phase. So make sure you have a lot of 240s laying around. You will need it. So once you go back out there with that, sand again. You're sand as much as you can. You're gonna sand most of the Bondo off, but most of the Bondo will be leveled into the layer line, so you don't really have to worry about that. But sand as much as you can. Don't sand too much on the areas you put Bondo on where it was scarring, because you will remove the Bondo and you will need to go back. That's what I had to do a lot on this project, as well as my jabber claws. I had to put another coat of Bondo on because I went on all of it with that sandpaper and I smoothed a bunch of the scarring off of it. Once you're done with that, don't half-ass it. Don't be like, all right, I'm done, I'm just gonna go to the next step. You want to make sure that if you have a lot of scarring still showing and the Bondo is not fully on it, go back inside, put another coat of Bondo on, make sure that's covering it, and then go back out and sand again. You do not want to half-ass this because it will show in the final product. So make sure you go back, put Bondo on that you missed, scarring, put another layer on, and then sand it again with that 240, because when you sand it again with that 240, it won't show as much because you have one layer and the other layer that you just added on to go over it, and it really will smooth it out. That helped a lot on my screws on this lamp, and that helped a lot on the bottom and the top of the brick of the lamp. So once you do it like that, make sure you put as much Bondo as you need and do not half-ass it. And when you're ready, when you feel like you've done it well and you didn't half-ass it, you didn't go back and be like, I'm done, I'm going to the next stage, you're ready for the priming stage. The sanding is finally over. I understand that is a lot of steps. It's a lot of steps, and trust me, I hate sanding with a passion. I do not like sanding, but sanding is most of the 3D printing process and the making everything smooth. That's what you need to do. And once you're done with that, you're on to the filler primer stage. Now, moving on to that filler primer stage, once you're done sanding everything down, you want to wash your print. You're going to have a lot of Bondo dust and plastic micro bits everywhere. You want to wash your print, make sure it's very washed down and clean, and you don't want any of that showing when you put the primer on, because that will also be on the final product. So make sure you wash your print and wash everything you got going on there. And once you're done with that, then you can move it on to the primer stage. And the primer I love to use always is going to be this Rust-Oleum filler primer right here. It's not going to get a good focus, but this Rust-Oleum filler primer right here, it's the good stuff. I like to go on very, very heavy with 3 coats. You can do more coats for this lamp. I did 3 coats of the filler primer and I was good with that. You could do 4, you could do 5, you could even do 6 coats, but I love to do 3. Make sure you lather all the filler primer on everywhere you need it to be. The filler primer levels very, very well. If you mess up, it kind of bails you out a lot and it will level onto the print very, very well and keep it very smooth. So make sure you put a lot of the primer on. Make sure you let it cure. It takes about 18 to 24 hours to cure. It doesn't take a long time, but you want it to cure and set because you thought you was done sanding. Now you're on to the wet sanding as well. So make sure you let it cure and you let it dry and do its own thing. The primer will take care of itself and it'll take care of your print. So as long as you let it do its own thing, it will benefit you in the long run. And after you're done priming everything down and you sprayed it to where you like it to be, you gotta go on to the wet sanding phase with the 400 grit sandpaper. Boom. When you get to that 400 grit sandpaper, you want to make sure and test that you let everything cure. So if that sandpaper gets clogged or blotched, that's when you know you need to let the primer still cure and still go crazy. Now in my area where I live, it was raining the entire week. I'll throw it up on the screen here. Raining the entire week, so I had to let it cure inside the house, which helped it a lot more. But the primer, or not the primer, the outside was very, very cold. With this primer, the cold doesn't really affect it, but the paint does. I'll get into that, but you have to let it cure. You can let it cure inside the house. You have a garage, let it cure there. You can let it cure outside as well. You have to let this cure and make sure it doesn't blotch up because you will need to restart and put more primer on afterwards if you do mess up on the wet sanding stage. For the wet sanding stage, all you need to do, get yourself some water, put water in a bowl, do it in a sink. I had to do it in the bathtub because that was the only way that I can get it because it was raining outside and I didn't want to keep it outside while I was wet sanding. Even though it kind of goes hand in hand, I just didn't want to do it outside. And once you do that, sand it smooth. Do not go too heavy on the wet sanding because you could scuff up all the wet or all the primer and scuff it all off. You just do a little bit of a smooth coat, put a little bit of pressure on, not too much to the point where everything will scuff up, but you could just put a little bit of pressure on and enough to where you're getting it smooth. And you want to run your finger on it and make sure that it's very smooth. It'll feel really good to your finger. It'll be very, very smooth. And once you see it like that and you don't see any more layer lines, then you're officially done with all the sanding. Like I keep saying in the past, do not half-ass this stage as well as the Bondo stage. If you feel as though that you didn't put enough Bondo on and you need to go back and sand, do that. And as well as this, if you feel as though there's still layer lines showing, there's still stuff going crazy and you still need to put more primer on, please do that. It will much benefit you in the long run. It will benefit you so much. Just go back, put another coat on and move on from there. Like I said, do not half-ass this at all. Like for me, most of the time when I put primer on, I don't need to go back outside and put more primer on after I'm done with the wet sanding stage. Most of the time it's already good and it's really, really perfect to where I want it to be. But sometimes you can over sand and I haven't got to that problem yet. Just make sure if you do run into that problem, go back outside, put more primer on, repeat the process and sand it back down to where you want it and where you like it to be. Now once you're done doing all the tedious sanding and everything you have to do with the wet sanding and the priming, once you're finally done with that, you're on to my favorite part, the painting. For this prop, I did not need to mask anything off. Everything was the same exact color, so I actually got bailed out with that. But I started it off with this Rust-Oleum white gloss base coat. Boom. As you guys know, for my Prowler cosplay, I'll throw it up on the screen. I really like the chrome and the metallic and the way that all came out together. So I always use this. Anything I have chrome, whether that be swords, lamps, just like this one, anything that I needed to be chrome, I love to do the white gloss base coat and the chrome overcoat. Shout out to my brother again, always for giving me that combo and doing the research on that. And he just relinquished that information and I've been using it ever since. So I did a little bit, or I did the coats of white gloss first. I like to do 3 coats. You could do more, you can do less because it is a base coat, but I like to do on a 3 coat base coat on everything. Make sure that's dry, and when that's dry, my goat comes in next. You know what I'm about to do. Boom, right here we got the chrome overcoat. Boom, we got the chrome Rust-Oleum overcoat. All I do is with that, I put 3 more coats on top of the white and get that overcoat, and it really makes it shine perfectly. It really makes it shine. Now for this lamp, it messed up a lot. This is the point in the video when I'm gonna tell you guys not to do. This messed up a lot. I'm gonna get into it more when I get to the assembly part, but I did, if you notice, I went over it with a completely different paint. I had to go over this entire lamp again with this chrome hand paint. You might be like, you're just telling me about the chrome overcoat and the white gloss base coat. Why did you have to go over it with this paint? boom. The reason why I had to go over it with that paint, and I'm gonna get into it a little bit more with the assembly, I did not have enough time to let this dry. When you work with the Rust-Oleum chrome and the Rust-Oleum white gloss, for some reason you really do have to let this chrome cure for a long time. Fingerprints will get all over it. You can merge the paint. There's so much with this chrome. It is such a beautiful color, but the chrome itself to work with is way more of a skill gap. It's so much more of a skill gap to work with. So I didn't have enough time to let this fully cure. Like I said, it was raining the rest of the week, and I had to really get this lamp done for my photo shoot. So I didn't have enough time to let it fully cure and set, but I thought I did because I gave it 3 days. 3 days of letting it sit and cure with everything on. I gave it that amount of time, and it still merged. It still merged, and it messed everything up. I'm about to show you guys right now. This is the lamp right here. As you notice, it doesn't have that main shine that you see, and it has a lot of scuff marks all over it because I couldn't let it cure, and I had to put it together. And putting this together really made this look like trash, like Gachiakuta trash. It really fit the aesthetic. So I ended up liking it still because it fits that like grittier vibe, and it was basically natural weathering of beating this up while putting it together. I'm gonna get more into it, like I said, when I get to the assembly part, but I had to use the hand paint and just go over all of it right there, and it was nothing too crazy there. I had to do that. Like I said, this chrome, using it and working with it, it's really much of a skill gap because you have to make sure that you let it cure for at least a week. That is the bare minimum that I did, because for my claws, I let that cure for a week and I did not have the same issue. But for this lamp, for some reason, I had that issue. So make sure you let that dry. Those are all the paints that I use, and that's all I needed to do. Now, last but certainly not least, we have the assembly. What do I say in every single one of my videos? Get yourself some Loctite super glue. This stuff right here is the real deal. I say it in every single one of my videos. Loctite, again, if y'all want to sponsor me, I'm right here. I'm forever gonna be grinding to get that Loctite sponsorship. I know y'all see me. Hit me on my email. I love y'all, and I always love y'all. What Loctite does is burns into whatever you're using, whether that be plastic, whether that be foam, whether that be resin, anything that you're using, whether that be fabric that you need to glue. Loctite burns into that material to adhere to the other material, and it burns it together. Loctite will always be the best glue. So I highly recommend to get you guys some Loctite. And all I did for this entire prop was put Loctite on all of it. Everything here is put together by Loctite. This has Loctite, the top part has Loctite, the screws right here have Loctite, the back is Loctited in. Everything on this prop is Loctited together. Granted, some of the pieces you really don't need Loctite, you can just snap it right into place, but I like to have that extra security to make sure it's not coming out, so everything in it is Loctited together. Moving on from the Loctite, shout out to my brother. He don't even know I'm using his soldering iron right now. I have a soldering iron right here. The way that this model was put together, these top parts right here, if you guys can see this part and this part over here, boom, right there, I had to weld those both together. The reason why I had to weld those is because they were too small to fit in the actual hole for me to glue it in, so I had to weld it. All I did was got me some extra pieces of scrap foam or scrap filament, extra pieces of scrap filament that I had lying around, and all I did was weld it together. Learn from me. A lot of fumes come out of soldering, obviously, so make sure you're in a ventilated area. Open a window. In my case, I open my door. Have everything open. Make sure you're wearing a mask, and make sure you do not burn yourself. I burned myself a few times, and golly, does it hurt. So make sure you're in a very safe environment and doing it safely. But all I did for this was grab the plastic, weld it together. It took me a few welds to actually get it very strong, but once I welded that together, if anything was still loose and falling off, I Loctited it together. So Loctite plus the weld, and it wasn't coming off. And that was basically it for all of the assembly. I used Loctite, I welded it together, and I used pieces of scrap PLA plastic that I had laying around, and it made it become out beautiful. Now, before we end off on the assembly, again, I want to say it did not cure fully. So I really, when I was doing all that assembly, talking about the Loctite, the soldering, it was still scuffing. It was getting fingerprints all over it, and I didn't have time to remake any of it. So I just went with the scuffiness and the messed upness. And even at the photo shoot, I was doing a lot of movements. I'll throw some pictures right here and here of me jumping around and doing a bunch of stuff, so it got scuffed even more. So the weathering on this prop is literally insane. The next time I do this prop, now this is the pros and the cons. If you guys stayed, I'm gonna tell you guys a new method that I'm doing on this prop. You probably already seen from my other videos if you've been following along. I'm going to use graphite powder, so I'm going to paint this entire thing satin black and go over the satin black with the graphite powder to get that shine and to have it shine more safely. It'll still retain the same shine as the Rust-Oleum chrome paint, but it'll just be way safer to deal with because because working with the satin is way easier than working with the chrome. I still would use the chrome for like blades and stuff, but for this prop I really don't think I'm ever gonna use chrome paint, or for props like that I know I have to put together and touch and it's not a one-off thing. I'm not gonna use the chrome. I think I'm gonna use the graphite powder method. That's what I highly recommend. I don't recommend doing what I did. I do not recommend using the paint and going over it. I'm just telling you guys the process that I did and what I took to make it like that with the paints, but I do not recommend it. If I would to recommend something, I would recommend hand painting it or going over it with the graphite powder and the satin black, and you will still yield the same results. It wouldn't be as shiny as the metallic, but you still would get, if you put a lot of graphite powder, I think you can get that shine to be as close as possible, and that's what I recommend. Now for my final thoughts of this entire project. Would I make this again, and did I enjoy making it? Obviously I'll make it again and I'll make it a lot better. And did I enjoy making this? Hell yes. This detail, not a lot of people know that he has a lamp. My homegirl was like, he has a lamp? Like, when did he have a lamp? Not a lot of people know that the raiders, all the raiders in Gachiakuta have lamps and have little special lamps that they have. So this was just a fun, cool little detailed piece to make my cosplay pop even more. Again, I'll throw a picture of it right here of the photo shoot that we did in the Mojave Desert. That was very, very fun. And if I have more pictures, I'll keep throwing up on the screen as I'm talking. But yeah, this was just a cool detail to make my cosplay pop even more. Shout out to Exhausted Weeb as well for having this model available to buy. He has a ton of great models. I'm gonna throw him in the description down below as well as put him on the screen. I highly recommend him because he's a great modeler. He models Rio's scissors, he models Zonka's staff, he modeled Jabber's claws, he probably modeled Rudol's gloves, he modeled a bunch of accessories from Gachiakuta. So if you need any type of 3D models from Gachiakuta, I highly recommend to go to him. He'll be down in the description down below, like I said. But other than that, on that note, that is it for this video, guys. I thank you guys so much for watching to the end of this video. Like I said, I'm going to get these videos back to back to back and keep getting them done while I'm working on Boba Fett. Boba Fett will be done by the end of this month. This will drop in probably, I'm filming this in February. This will drop probably in March.
Is this nigga serious?
It will be done at the end of March. I will have the videos up for you guys on how I made all of Boba Fett stuff. And next thing after that will be the Tron disc. I'm going to learn how to solder and put lights in it. So that's going to be a fun tutorial build. And I hope you guys stay tuned for all of that. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Without y'all, like I keep saying, I wouldn't have the motivation to keep going. I wouldn't have the motivation to keep grinding and to keep going on this journey if it wasn't for you guys. I love you guys so much. So thank you so much for rocking with me. I'm done with the yaps. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, your night, whenever y'all motherfuckers is watching this video. And as always, keep designing, making, and building, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.